Chapter 5. The satyr bowed before Perforos, who was surprised to see the goatish creature in his inner chamber at the heart of Mount Velus. Perforos had no memory of granting him entrance to the divine forge where the god spent his days before the eternal flames, but that didn't mean he hadn't done so. Even before Krufix's punishment, Perforos could lose himself for days, years, even eons, in the act of creation. Then Krufix had limited his memories and taken hard-earned knowledge from him as compensation for the damage that his sword had inflicted on Nyx. Furious that the Pantheon had let him be mistreated, Perforos dwelled in the fires of Mount Velus and no longer ventured into the realm of the gods. He took the form of a man. He felt the afflictions of a man. He'd even embraced the self-pity of a mortal's mind.
"What did you say?"
Perforos asked the satyr. Perforos's deep voice echoed in the chamber, and lesser creatures would have quailed in his presence. The satyr was small, corporeal, and self-assured. He did not shiver or quake in the presence of a god. Perforos's own priests kept their chins down in his presence for fear of angering him. But this satyr brazenly met his eyes and did not blink from the fire burning in them. "What about your sword?" the satyr asked. "It's been called the Sword of Chaos. They say it's your greatest creation."
"What of it?"
Perforos asked. "What became of it?" the satyr asked.
"Lost to the sea,"
Perforos said. Perforos didn't correct the bleeding satyr, but the sword was not his greatest work of art. His greatest creation was a Nyx-born man named Petros, who was in the chamber with them. Petros stood nearby in front of the divine forge, toiling in honor of his creator. When the world was young, Perforos was jealous of Iroas and Mogis, and wanted a twin of his own. He'd created Petros from the cosmos, divine bronze, with a touch of mortal flesh. Petros, who had existed longer than any mortal human, was always present in the forge. As the eons passed, Petros aged, not like a human, but he withered, and Perforos was forced to patch the cracks with strips of bronze and refill the vessel of his Nyx-born twin. "Are you certain?" the satyr asked. "What if a fortune hunter were to find such a treasure? How might the world respond?"
"The world can't wield my sword,"
Perforos said with annoyance. Then how might Polukranos respond? the satyr wondered.
"Who?"
Perforos said. The word sounded familiar, but he felt a black cloud cross his god's sight and couldn't remember the question. But Petros turned away from the fires and stared at the satyr. He understood the mortal's language, but he could not speak as other humans did. He helped Perforos forge the sword in the searing explosive furnace. Because Krufix hobbled Perforos's mind, it was Petros who remembered how to craft with the essence of the cosmos. Through his actions, Petros reminded Perforos of everything that Krufix had stolen from him. The satyr was so unnerved at the sight of Petros's face that he took a step backward. Petros had been made in Perforos's image, and his chiseled features were an exact replica of the god's own face. Like Perforos, Petros looked like a muscular man whose coal-hued skin was covered with mutable bronze. The satyr was one of the first mortals to ever see Petros and survive. At the height of Perforos's power, he killed mortals for gazing uninvited on him or his Nyx-born twin. "Who is this?" the satyr asked, regaining his composure.
"This is my artisan. And who are you?"
Perforos inquired. "Your artisan is a wonder," the satyr said, "and I am your oracle." The satyr stared greedily at Petros, who could not speak to call the satyr a liar. A momentary panic washed over Perforos, who couldn't remember claiming this vessel to be his oracle. But he was distracted from his fears by drops of rain, which were falling through the open shaft of Mount Velus and cascading into the fiery forge. He opened his massive palm and let the drops fall onto his starry skin, so not a drop would be lost into the dry earth. Thesa had come to call. By the time she arrived, both the satyr and Petros were gone, but Perforos was distracted by the sound of his sister, like a pearly seashell whispering the sounds of the sea. He didn't comprehend the theft of Petros, whom he loved like a son. Besides, Thesa's arrival reminded him of other things. Smoke clouded the god's eyes, and he felt a glimmer of the rage in his belly. The anger was a shadow of his former self. In eons past, the world trembled in fear of his fury. As the civilization of humans grew and they constructed temples and built shrines, Heliod insisted on the finest rams, the finest lands, and placed himself at the head of the mortals' table. Perforos had his worshippers among the mortals, but Heliod was better loved. Perforos's fury grew at the thought of how he'd been wronged, but then Thesa's musical voice spoke to him through the smoke, and the rage faded. It had been far too long since he'd seen his sister of the sea. "Your forge is as oppressive as always, brother," Thesa complained, looking around the steaming chamber. "Where are your smiths?" she asked. Perforos led her out of the heart of the mountain into his main cavern, where scores of smiths and masons toiled at endless rows of burning forges. She stood on the balcony above the work and admired the towering pillars filled with stars. There were statues of monsters with molten veins and tongues of fire. The ceiling of the cavern had been transformed into an airy dome. It pulsed with artificial visage of stars created in the image of Nyx, but fashioned to his liking. In Perforos's version of the night sky, Heliod was bound with chains to the rock of Mount Velus, while Crufix had been reduced to a puddle of murky stars. "You have no need to return to the god realm," Thesa said. "Your creations are more exquisite now than when you dwelled in the coldness of Nyx."
When Heliod is put in his place among the snails, then I will return to the sky.
"Have you created something new?" Thesa asked.
I am always creating,
Perforos answered.
Just seldom are they worth keeping.
Perforos swept his arm in an arc before him, and a warm breeze blew through the interior of the mountain. Of course, he had created something new. The mountain was bursting at the seams with all that he had done. "Have you crafted a new weapon to take your revenge on our brother?" Thesa clarified. "Heliod's a vain coward, and you can tell me. I would rejoice at the sight of him broken in the sand." He stared at her. Hadn't someone else just been asking about the weapon? There were dark clouds in his memory. He wondered if Crufix had his mossy fingers around his throat, even now, even so far away from the edge of the world. Perforos did not answer, so Thesa spoke again. "I have heard the footfalls of the Hydra echoing on the floor of the sea."
Polukranos,
Perforos said. The name finally returned to his mind, accompanied by a sense of barely controlled fury. "Can the horizon lie, brother?" she asked. "The gods are so divided. Your sword brought discord that has never been resolved. The Hydra..."
Crufix is mad. If the horizon lies, it does so carelessly and at his bidding,
Perforos said. Already his attention on her was waning. his desire to return to his ceaseless creation tugging him away from her. Perforos hated their brother Crufix, who held dominion over time and the horizon. Crufix had power the rest of them didn't understand, power that seemed to reside outside his domain in the ribs of their world. As punishment for harming Nyx, he'd made Perforos's mind unravel, unlearning many things he already knew. But Crufix couldn't touch Perforos's drive to forge, to build, to destroy, and recreate. "Are you attacking Heliod again?" she asked bluntly. "Did you call the Hydra from his resting place? Is the God Realm threatened again?"
"I am not?"
Perforos asked. Though his curiosity was piqued, wisps of fire caressed her skin. "You created the divine sword that made Heliod tremble. You forged it with fire and ingenuity. Surely you must remember, and surely you want your revenge." Perforos raged his fury in an explosion of fire and molten stones that surged into the sky above Mount Velis. Thesa drained herself into the ground to avoid his wrath.
"Crufix stole my mind! He strangles me still!"
"No, he doesn't, brother," Thesa assured him when he had quieted and the forge rang again with the sound of hammers. "Not anymore."
"Why do you seek the weapon?"
Perforos asked. "Heliod claims the world is crumbling," Thesa said. "He both dreams and is blind. Things are happening that should not be."
"He blames my sword,"
Perforos asked. "He blames you," she said. Perforos became a tiny flame in Thesa's hand. His voice was nearly lost among the clang and clatter of the work.
"I cannot remember."
His shame touched her, and she wanted to grab Crufix by his bony shoulders and thrash him until all that Perforos lost came flooding back. But she would never be able to touch the god of time. So for a fleeting moment, the two of them fled the mountain as mist and flame. To Thesa, the currents of the air moved like the waves of the sea, and she showed Perforos how to rejoice in it. The skies over Akros became red as blood, and the air rippled like the surface of the ocean, and comets of ice and fire rained from the sky. Thesa and Perforos didn't reveal themselves in a recognizable god form, so the people of Akros only saw the heavens become like fire. The mighty Data River surged and boiled in the gorge below the city. Great billows of steam rose from the rushing waters and engulfed the temples and rolled over the houses in great waves. Only the head of the stone colossus stood above the hissing blast, and far away in the mountains the Leonians in their remote camps stood on the cliffs and wondered, even trembled, at the fearful sky. In Akros, the oracles shouted words of chaos louder than they shouted visions of peace. But they were confused because when two gods merge, their language becomes something new entirely. Thesa and Perforos finally rested in the mouth of the forge. Their breathing was labored, both nearly overcome with great grace and the passion of speed. They appeared as man and woman again, even though Thesa knew that Perforos would never love her. But then and there, he made her a chimera gift, with feathered wings, a long black beak, and bones as delicate as glass. The chimera contained aspects of both an ibis and a stag. He crafted it of stars and divine bronze with his own hands. It began as a handful of dust, and he shaped it into a glorious creation befitting the divine. When he presented it to Thesa, she clapped her hands with childish delight, but it had no eyes, just bare sockets, empty as the void beyond the edges of the world.
"It can run faster," than an arrow shot from Nylea's bow,
Perforos promised.
It won't rest until it discovers the sword that I have lost. If it was lost forever, we will know. If it has risen again, we will find it.
But your chimera is blind, Thesa said. She hesitated to speak because she knew that sight was fickle at best, and she didn't want to question his creation. Perforos smiled, and Thesa's heart leaped. He was not one for mirth.
Great eye, fill it with your own.
And he laughed, and the ground roiled and trembled, and all the birds of Theros took wing at once, because they were so startled to hear the fire bull laugh. And Thesa became a ribbon of water that flowed into the chimera. She gave it perfect eyes that could see through the skins and makeshift shells and deceits of those she hated. And the chimera stamped its hooves and pranced, ready to be unleashed. Your favor has destroyed me, Thesa said humbly, and she rejoiced in another rare smile from Perforos. I shall call her Galeia, for never has there been such a gift of splendor. Perforos turned and trudged to the forge. His weary footfalls made the earth quake from the walls of Akros to the cypress gates at the edge of the Nezian forest. Already the fleeting moments of joy were forgotten. And what if Galeia finds the thief who stole your sword? Thesa called to him.
Then I will crush the one who wields it and scour the land around him,
Perforos said.
I will lay waste to his family and all he holds dear.
Thesa nodded, but said nothing. Phoenix had whispered to her, so she knew the person he sought. It was a woman, not a man, but it didn't matter. Galeia would find the sword, and Perforos' creation would be returned to him. He would lose his shame and return to Nyx. Heliod would be humbled, and his arrogant tyranny finally stopped. The Pantheon would be restored to the natural order. No god laid low, no god pretending to be king. Galeia departed, running so fast that a mortal would see nothing. They might only feel the wind flowing behind her. Thesa was no wiser than before, but she returned to the quiet darkness of the restless seas, keeping Phoenix's other secret to herself. Wherever the mortal carries the stolen sword, the fallen Hydra would follow.